So, advantages, actually very short closing dates. You can get materials to a newspaper the day before you run. It's good for a day, meaning you get a fast response. You're not gonna get most of your responses in a week. You're gonna get them the day the ad runs. Lots of formats, broad coverage of the marketplace. Disadvantages are you can't really do color very well. The print quality in general is just not great. The paper's cheap, etc. And again, short shelf life, read and thrown away and put at the bottom of a bird cage or for wrapping up fish and chips in the UK. This is from your book. Similar to the previous page, and has got a wide reach, city by city. It's timely, meaning it's that day's news, that day's ads, that day's deals. Desirable audience, people who read newspapers tend to be more upscale. In fact, in certain papers, you're going to get the opinion influencers that you want. Editorial content has impact. People are drawn to it and involved in it, spend a lot of time reading it. Drawbacks are it's just for a day, active readers, and then the black and white color issue. By the way, on the environmental front, we talked about out-of-home having had, in the past at least, a kind of lack of scenic beauty sort of, or interfering with scenic beauty on the highways and byways kind of image for out-of-home. But we also made the point that for out-of-home, there are other issues, that have come to the fore in the last few years, environmental issues, global warming, for instance, that make the impact of billboards on the environment seem pretty petty. In newspapers, there's a lot of paper that's created, but 73% of the newsprint in the U.S. is recycled and made into other things, including new newspapers. So you should know that if you're reading a paper version of a newspaper. And we do need to talk about digital. They doesn't use paper, right? It doesn't have to take a bunch of boys in Kathy Ireland to get on their little bikes and ride around the neighborhood throwing papers at people's front porches and making them more than missing them, hopefully. Right, it just shows up in your computer every day or early in the morning. This is the subscription actually that I pay for the New York Times digital edition, which is what I get, $15 a month. And then they used to include the recipes, but then they broke it out separate. And I signed up for that. And I saved lots of recipes, but I don't think I've yet made one. But they are fun to read. I send them to my daughter. She's a vegetarian. I send her recipes, and she ignores those too. Home delivery is more expensive because, you've got to pay somebody to come out and deliver it, as Amazon will tell you. The last mile to the home is the expensive part. Here's the New York Times website. I was just reading it today. Again, I find it a great way to read the paper. I do still like the print edition, though. I've got some navigation up here by content. I've got the big headlines here. Still, I'm getting banners. If I play a video, I'll get some pre-roll video. So, see, I couldn't have that guy smoking his cigar in my print edition of it unless I was Harry Potter. And then people do all kinds of things in the print editions of in Harry Potter's world. Well, the digital edition for the Times is very successful, and it's one reason why they have over 5 million subscribers. By the way, all students at FIT have free access to the digital edition. of the New York Times. You also have free print papers all over the school, new ones every day. I know there's a stack of them in the A building right by the elevators on the first floor. So if you want to find out more, or you're looking for a newspaper to read for your MMJ, there you go. Okay, let's go back to what we were doing. Okay, so what is newspaper? Is it the content or the format? In other words, is buying an ad in the New York Times on the web and internet spending or newspaper spending? And it's good question. I count it as all as newspaper, and I'd do the same for magazines. So whether it's the printed version or the website version of the same publication, to me, it's a newspaper or it's a magazine. Is it better for the environment to read your newspaper online? Okay, so let's look at another environmental piece here from Slate.com, which is an online news site. Ran probably about a year ago. I ran more than that ago. I pulled it about a year ago. Okay. Dead Tree newspapers and their online editions is a lot smaller than you might imagine. Traditional newsprint may actually come out ahead versus digital in terms of total environmental impact. A whole bunch of trees get chopped down to provide the Sunday morning information. There you go. Because a lot of trees come down. But 40% of Star Tribune newsprint comes from recycled, 5% higher than national. But this is 2008, remember, and it's gone up quite a bit since then. All right, so distribution costs. But 69% at this point are recycled. About 1/3 of the newsprint gets shipped to China. Anyway, so, but when you count the electricity to power the computer and some other things, it ends up being closer than we thought. Okay. FYI, folks, FYI. Whoop, come on there. There we go. All right, we need to talk about fake news, because fake news is often pointed out as taking place in newspapers, which is actually fake news, that there's fake news in newspapers. Online really has most of the fake news. Newspapers have editors and publishers and people who carefully scan the content for any falsehoods. They don't want to get sued. So you don't have a lot of fake news, quote unquote, in typical newspapers. Where you have it is online, particularly in the social media sites where people are posting anything they want. And no one's really looking at it. There's no editor. So out of home, CPM. Oh, I took that. You know what? Here we go. You know me. I'm just going to go in and fix it. I added this to the, whoa, doggone it. I added this to the presentation. I recognized that I didn't have a little piece where we went back and talked about CPMs and quality of the impression, which I'm trying to do with all of our media types. So there you go. Fix it on the fly. So what's the CPM of newspapers? What's the quality of impression of newspapers? And we know this is the quality of impression, CPM measurability. Well, in terms of CPM, you're going to look over to the far right, and you'll see the far right column there is newspapers. It has a high CPM, but that's based on a full page. Smaller ads have a lot lower CPM. Newspapers aren't cheap on a CPM basis. They're expensive. And quality of impression, let's just talk about that for a minute. We'll think about it. For the online version, of course, you can have video, you can have audio, You can also have banners and static things, but for the paper version of the newspaper, there's no sound and there's no movement and no video, and the color isn't very good. So, but what you do have is the newspapers are read carefully normally. They're not just skimmed. So your ad's going to get read. It's going to get looked at. If it's placed in the right section, better yet, in terms of getting your audience and getting people into what you're saying, if what you're saying relates to that content section. So I'd say the quality of the newspaper impression is kind of in the middle. I tend to view print, just like radio, as something that involves your imagination, because if you think about when you read a book, how at least me, I typically kind of make pictures in my mind about what the hero and the heroine and everybody looks like, particularly if they've made a movie out of the book, then I sort of can't help myself. But the point is that anything other than video, you need to make up with what's missing with your mind. So I would just suggest that newspapers also engage, as do magazines, engage your imagination to try to picture what the words are saying. So I think that's a positive on the impression side, but basically kind of in the middle in terms of impressions and kind of expensive in terms of CPM. Future of newspapers, will it all be online someday? Maybe so, maybe so. In terms of the editorial, companies are experimenting with having robots read the Associated Press newswire that gets sent from the foreign correspondents from the wire services, gets sent to all the newspapers, and then a robot can rewrite the press release to sound more like an article. And this is happening, being tested at newspapers. So is the future to not have writers even, but to have robots do this writing more and more. And what do you feel about that? Kind of weird. That's how I feel. So now we're at the end of our agenda. I think I'm going to go back and look at our original agenda. I mean, we're almost done here. As you can see, 80 slides. Oh my gosh, you guys, we've covered a lot of ground here. All right, so we talked about all this good stuff. We even talked about the future a little bit, and now we're talking about what's going to happen in the next class, what's the homework and what's the reading. Okay, so let's go back to this. Where are you? There you are. Okay. So you're going to do My Media Journey for newspapers. I would really prefer you do the paper version, but it's okay if you do online, but I prefer you to do paper. So you're going to write it up and answer the questions just like you did for the out-of-home one. You're going to do you're going to pick an ad. I would like you to please pick an ad that is reaching an opinion influencer. Not just a regular ad. If you can, please do that. You should be able to find some in there if you look around. Do a Tabasco, target, benefit, support, brand character. If there's an offer, there probably isn't if it's an opinion influencer ad, by the way. What do you remember and what moves you? And that's going to be due in a week. Your reading is getting cut off on the slide thing here, but you'll find it in, I'll post everything on Blackboard, and you'll find it also in the syllabus for this week. Now, by the way, since none of you, I think, are a typical newspaper reader, I am going to need you to understand someone else for your analysis of the Tabasco ad, of the newspaper ad. And I want you to say whether you think it's going to work, and I want you to use some empathy. place yourself, imagine yourself as